Why do topics like immigration matter to us? We're in the Magic Valley. We're in Twin Falls. I'm in Kimberly. We're so far away from what the federal government is doing with immigration. What can we possibly do? Well, if possession is 9/10 of the law, we're on the ground. We're the ones who are here taking care of the problems. We're the ones who will execute solutions here. We're the ones who will think of solutions. The issue, though, is that topics like immigration are so plagued by dishonesty. Frankly, that's the state of politics today. It's much easier to trick you and make something seem like something else than it is to actually convince you. That's the state of politics today. It's obscured by dishonest rhetoric. The words they use, they shift meanings in the middle of the argument to mean something else, and so that you think you're agreeing with one thing when you're actually agreeing with another. And it's very biased on both sides. I believe that we can, if we agree on, we understand the truth about these things, that we can come to some solutions that work for our county and for our state. But we can't do that if we're not clear and honest about the topic. And so that's what we're doing. We're looking at articles that are going to help us be clear and honest about the topic. And even if you don't care about the topic, these principles apply to any topic you can imagine. We need clarity. We need to understand the true problem in order to find solutions. Albert Einstein, I think, said, and probably Abraham Lincoln and a bunch of other guys said, if you give me 10 hours to solve a problem, what is it, 10 hours? 60 minutes to solve a problem, I'll spend 59 minutes defining it, and then I'll spend 1 minute solving the problem. And I found that to be true for difficult problems. And so let's do that. Let's apply that principle. Let's use liberal arts principles to ask questions about the truth about a topic, and then use reason and logic to understand what can we do to fix it. Let's go. I'm Chris Stadler, and I live in Kimberly, Idaho, and I'm here to ask for help. The news sucks. Nobody believes it. It gives us just enough information to be worried and helpless and dependent on politics for our salvation. But we live here, and possession is 9/10 of the law. We're responsible for our own problems, and we can fix them. It all starts with a kind of journalism that helps us understand the problem with the right information and insight. I'm not the solution, but I'm here to use my journalism background to ask good questions and ask for help. I'm Chris Stadler. This is the Magic Valley J School, and this series is Journalist Reacts. All right, thanks for joining me. It is morning time here in Kimberly, Idaho, and it's what is it? It's November 2nd. It's starting to get a little cool. We are talking. We're having coffee, and we're talking about an article. We're talking about immigration. Is the solution to America's immigration crisis hiding inside an Idaho dairy farm? This article by Ali Noorani from the Deseret Times seeks to answer this question, or at least I hope answers this question, or at least I hope attempts to answer this question. So far we have a long narrative that is it's very biased. It's trying to tell a story in one direction, which a story is supposed to do. I sense a little bit. I've noticed a little bit of dishonesty in there. I think that there needs to be a distinction made between illegal, unchecked immigration and legal immigration, because I think he's painting everyone who is against illegal immigration as against immigration, including Donald Trump, which I don't think he's against immigration. I think he's against illegal immigration. At least that's from what I've seen. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if he's against immigration, which would be kind of a crazy take. And so I think this article really attempts to try to get credibility where it doesn't deserve it, in saying that everyone who's against illegal immigration is against immigration. And I want to caution you, if you are against illegal immigration, don't let anyone say that about you. Don't allow that to get into your heart. Don't let that be something that infects your thinking, because uh, in one way we are a nation of immigrants. In the Native Americans are immigrants, if you trace it back far enough, right? They crossed the land bridge from Alaska. It's not. We shouldn't think that way. We shouldn't think like, okay, well, you're a newer immigrant, therefore, if there are still people. It's a complicated argument, and it doesn't help humans get stronger and better. It's a Marxist argument that's meant to tear down society and help us all be enemies. And so the government can say, oh, you guys are fighting. Well, we just have to get involved now, right? And so we're not about that. We're about taking care of things at the local level, and we're about taking care of our community in Twin Falls, Idaho, in the Magic Valley, where we live, and we can actually help our neighbors, and where it's not theoretical, right? Where we can actually do things to help each other. So let's figure some things out so that we can do it with knowledge and understanding. And so let's go ahead and start where we left off. We just saw a dinner where, in what year was that? Let's look. A dinner in 2019, August 2019, where a bunch of people got together. The dairy, it sounds like he said the dairy industry in Idaho, some representatives of the dairy industry and Senator Mike Simpson got together and built bridges, right? And kind of understood each other, including a table of immigrants who showed up who work in the dairy industry. He did not distinguish between illegal immigrants and immigrants. He doesn't do that in this article, which is very unhelpful. It's very hard to trace his argument when he doesn't make that distinction, because that is at the essence for most people. And so let's take a look and let's see if he can make more sense toward the end here, because that really takes a lot of the reason and information out of the article that's crucial to making this decision for most people. All right, years ago, I would say this is a story of unlikely allies working together. He's talking about the dinner we just referenced. That no longer applies. Across race, gender, religion, even politics, people are finding a common purpose in the pursuit of justice and dignity for migrants, which bodes very well for the story of our nation. Any migrants? And so this is the argument. If you're against illegal immigration, you don't want dignity for migrants. And I think there are people out there who are just prejudiced, who are just like, we just don't like people who are not like us. There are a few people like that, less and less. I remember, I don't think it's as pervasive as the news acts like it is sometimes. I think the news wants us to be enemies, and they want to pretend like there are problems when they don't exist, or when they're much smaller than they are. That's not helpful. That doesn't help us to be adults in an informed society. I remember growing up as an army brat. We were in Panama, and we had friends of all different kinds. And maybe it's because of the situation I was in, the military. I didn't see racism in the military. In fact, I would joke about someone's race, and they would joke about my race, and that meant we were friends because we were able to talk like that, right? And so today they would call me racist I'm when that behavior is so much less racist than they think it is, right? Than they are probably. Um, like, I think the mainstream media could learn something from cultures like the military, where you're all friends. You're Americans in another country, Panama, and your buddy is black, and he's driving you around in his parents' white Mercedes diesel to soccer games, and you have a white friend who's a surfer, and then you have a couple of Hispanic friends who Hispanic Americans. I mean, it's just not like, it's not a thing. And then when I went to the University of Oregon, everybody's breaking their arms, patting themselves on the back for not being racist like everybody else is, and it's like, that's not true. I don't believe that. I don't see that. So so the dignity for migrants bodes well for the story of our nation. I want him to define migrants, because I think, first of all, I think everybody has dignity. I don't think people who come over the border illegally should be stripped down and marched through the streets naked or anything like that, right? Um, I think they should be deported with respect. And, like, it's possible to do that and say, hey, you need to be deported. Um, and we don't hate you. You shouldn't come over. Please don't do that anymore. We don't hate you. We don't think you're less than, but you're not allowed here because we have laws, right? And every nation has laws about immigration. I think maybe there's some that don't. Um, Even the Soviet Union had laws about immigration, right? But it was more like, you're not allowed to leave. So, um, okay, or immigration, I guess. All right. So, all right, let's keep reading. The policy solutions are the easy part. Recognize the dignity of undocumented people. Okay, now he's talking about undocumented. All right, has he been talking about undocumented this whole time? I don't know, because he hasn't said. All right, so the policy recognize the dignity of undocumented people by allowing them to gain citizenship. Okay, so now he's showing his hand. He's saying, if they're here, they should have a path towards citizenship. We shouldn't deport. Well, but doesn't that incentivize people to just get in our country any way possible? And then, because then they'll have a path towards citizenship, and they're basically allowed to be here. And so there's no real, it's basically, if you're a legal immigrant, like, what's the difference between coming over what's the difference between being legal, going through the proper channels, and coming over and just coming over? And there's probably a procedural difference where it's like if you come over legally. I've known some South Africans who would be a huge benefit to our society. They're hardworking and um, and trained, and they benefit our society. And it's taken them so long just to be able to, to be here legally. If it seems to me that there are hurdles that they have to jump through that these people wouldn't be, because for what reason? So that dairy farms can have labor? Surely there's another way. Surely it's not just like, allow anyone to come over and get citizenship, or there's no dairy workers, right? And so it seems like there's probably another solution. I'd love to hear from someone who is more familiar with this topic, and I'd love to talk to you and on the air and figure out some of these things. Gain citizenship, create a migration system that humanely manages the global movement of people. And the global movement. So are we talking about like a international governing body, like the UN, maybe? I don't know. And establish enforcement mechanisms that maintain borders and do not place people in harm's way. I don't get it. I don't get why you would do this if you're just. I mean, yeah, I don't. It feels like a word salad. Starting to feel like a little bit like a word salad. I don't really understand, and maybe it's just because I don't know. Maybe there's a more structured policy behind this, and he's not saying it, but he's just kind of referring to it, and it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense in how I'm reading it. The reconciliation of our politics, much less our cultures, is the hard part. Yes, because if people don't share our values, then how are they going to come over and not cause problems? And I think that's the issue, and he's avoiding it. And I think if this article were written from a conservative point of view, it'd be I think I'd be equally irritated. But I think I come from more of a conservative background, but I think I'd be irritated because I would see this as you're missing the point. You're not acknowledging something that's very important, that our culture, the culture informs policy, right? The culture informs policy. What you believe informs policy. What you believe is right and wrong informs your laws. Where you come from, how you've seen it work, informs the laws that you want. If you come from chaos and you know how to operate in chaos, so there are some people who, I remember being in Panama and there was a lot of corruption there, and so I remember going with a friend to get my license renewed, I think. And they're like, "You have two parking tickets," and I'm like, "What? I've never had a parking ticket." And the guy who was with me, who worked for my dad, he was intelligence, and he was on the ground. He was an interrogator, interpreter, interrogator basically. And he's just like, "Just don't say anything, don't say anything, just pay it." And so I paid it, and he knew how to work in the corrupt system, right? And I didn't. I was like, I'm American, and there's justice, and you can't, false weights and measures are not good, And he's just like, we're in Panama. You need to just pay it because it's easier to pay it than it is to fight it. And you're not going to win. You're not going to change the culture. What are you hoping to do, right? They're going to win, and so if you're used to working in that society, you're probably fine with it, and you probably bribe people, and you like I did. I basically, who knows if that money went to the state or whether that money went to her, this lady who said I had two parking tickets. It was like $10 total, but which was a lot for me. Um, but anyway, and so if you're there's a different set of beliefs, a different different cultures. In Dearborn, Michigan, we see calls for Sharia law, right? That's opposite our constitution, right? So are we going to pretend these things don't happen? Or are we going to look at the situation and say, okay, here's how much of that we can tolerate before we break? And here are the laws that will put order to that. And maybe, just maybe, some of these decisions need to be made at the more local level. I don't know. We're talking about national borders, so I'm not sure. I'd love to talk to somebody who's more sophisticated in this topic. Let's finish it up here. We're almost done. Our character, nationally and individually, is based on how we treat people. Wherever they may live, whatever their status may be, do we recognize the value of people regardless of citizenship? Our dignity as a nation depends on the ability of our system to recognize the inherent value of each person. Okay, what's the article promise? How do we solve the immigration issue? Is the solution to America's immigration crisis hiding inside an Idaho dairy farm? So far, all I can see is the solution is kind of unchecked immigration. If I'm understanding him correctly, I think he's saying unchecked immigration because he's saying create a migration system. Oh, wait, sorry. Recognize the dignity of undocumented people by allowing them to gain citizenship. Oh, so dignity means that you give them what they want. Can you treat someone with dignity and still say you did something wrong? If if someone if someone sells drugs, or if someone you know assaults somebody, are we like taking away their dignity by saying they did something wrong and punishing them? Maybe that's your definition of dignity. And so we have to question these terms. Dignity. What does dignity mean? And we need to have a solid, in order to be not prejudicial, in order to be more dogmatic and more like, it's a bad word, right? But more doctrine based, right? We have a doctrine, we have a belief about the world, and we have a doctrine. We need to we need to understand what we mean. We need to understand the goal, and we need to understand some of the words that are being used. Because what he's doing here is he's saying, okay, if you like people, then you should be on our side, right? If you treat people well, which means you're a good person, then you're going to be in favor of um, recognizing the dignity of people, which means that you give them a path to gain citizenship, which means that if they're undocumented people, which means they're here and they're not supposed to be, then you give them a path to citizenship. Essentially, you don't make them leave, right? That's what I'm hearing. I don't know. Maybe there is more nuance to this that I don't understand it. I'm sure he would say there is, but we have to have our own policy. We have to think clearly. In order to think clearly, again, we have to make a rule and we have to acknowledge a truth that is outside of us. And so we can make an argument for that and say, okay, here's how we want to do things in our county. You don't help each other by not recognizing the problems or by mischaracterizing the problems. If you mischaracterize the problems, you end up with a mess, because there's no way to make doctrine, there's no way to make laws that flow from true understanding of the situation and a true understanding of right and wrong. If all you say is treating people nice, human dignity is what I say it is, and then and now you weaponize human dignity, and that's what he's doing here. If all you say is that, now all you're doing is just, saying, well, whatever I say, just listen to me, take orders from me, because if you love people, then you will, you know, you'll take my definition of dignity. And so you can tell I'm a little bit like perplexed by this approach, right? And so I think we need to get away from this idea that, that, I mean, he lays his cards on the table. He says the quiet part out loud, I guess, you know? And so he lets us know what he's thinking. And so now we're able to tear it apart and say, okay, the only way to recognize someone's dignity isn't to keep them in our country legally. So let's reject that as the argument for illegal immigration or undocumented, immigration or whatever. And it's the whole like nobody's illegal. Okay, you're missing the point, right? When they say nobody's illegal, that misses the point. And so we need to, if someone says nobody's illegal, that's probably not someone you want to argue with, because they're already coming from a place of manipulation, right? They're already trying to manipulate you by changing, it's a rhetorical tool, but not the good kind of rhetoric, right? Not a sane argument, but rather a prejudicial argument. We have to learn how to know the difference between a prejudicial argument and a sane argument. That's what we're doing here. All right. It's a modified excerpt. Okay, so this essay is a modified excerpt from Ali Noorani's Crossing Borders, The Reconciliation of a Nation of Immigrants. President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Immigration Forum for 14 years, Ali Noorani was a fellow at the Arizona State University Social Transformation Lab. On June 22nd, Noorani joined the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation as their program director for U.S. democracy. All right. So ends our tour de force through this Deseret News article. Is the solution to America's immigration crisis hiding inside of an Idaho dairy farm? I don't think we found it so far, although we've gotten a glimpse into a admittedly hopeful model of how things could look if what he says is true. And we have to really unpack some of these assumptions that he makes, one of which is that, oh, these immigrants just come and become a part of our family and culture. If they did, I would think they would be welcome. I would want to welcome them. We have a lot of abortions in our country. We have a lot of broken families, and a birth rate's low. We have some problems. Bringing in immigrants who share our values could really help us. That's the question. How do we know they share our values if they're if they're undocumented coming in for potentially nefarious purposes? We don't know, and we have to figure that out. So we need to keep asking questions, and because we aren't able to help each other in reality by blowing smoke. We have to be able to ask questions, get to the bottom of things, and uh, share a common belief system, share a common goal, at least superficially or at least at some depth. And so we can make laws that where we can work together, where we have a shared sense of how we act toward each other, and what's called being civilized. And so we need to think through these things so that we're not just taking our favorite online personality as the authority on what it means to be civilized, or what it means to love your neighbor, or what it means to treat people with dignity, because those words can be weaponized. And if someone else controls the language and they change the language, then they win the argument because now you're demonized. So we need to keep thinking. We need to keep asking questions and interrogating articles like this and interrogating topics like this and making sure that they make sense. Stress test them because we need to find truth, right? We need to be able to help each other in Magic Valley and Twin Falls, and we need to be able to help each other. Should the world crumble, we should be able to help each other, and we need to be able to understand issues if we're to do that. So thanks for joining me, and we'll talk to you next time. Guys, just a reminder that asking the dumb questions is the most important thing you can do in a world where everyone wants you to skip past the most important questions. They want you to think that if you ask the important questions, that you're naive and you should already know the answer because it's so simple. But the truth is, to get to the bottom of tough issues, you ask the dumb questions, the basic questions, the questions they don't want you to question. If you guys have questions, or if you guys have comments, I would love to hear them in the comments of this video. Or if you're seeing this in Facebook, in the comments in Facebook. And in the meantime, guys, keep asking the dumb questions.